Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Hey there, Steve Schwartz here, and welcome to another episode of College Admissions Toolbox. Today, we're talking with David Petersam. So let's get started. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, David. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Stephen. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Well, now you've got a really exciting background. You worked in admissions at the University of Chicago, and now you've gone on to found your own private admission consulting practice, Admissions Consultants. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into admissions at UChicago in the first place?
I probably got lucky. Looking back on it, I think I made at least a few mistakes in my application, probably a few things I could have done better. But I just ended up there as an MBA student and started helping out I wanted to give something back to the schools. I started interviewing, applicants for admission, and it just kind of took on a life of its own from there.
Oh, wow, David, that's really something. Was there a pivotal moment that brought you from working in admissions at UChicago to ultimately starting your own business and your own practice?
There was. I was working for a strategic consultancy. I was traveling Monday through Thursday, and I got a voicemail one day through work. It was a cousin of a girl I had worked with at my previous job, and I definitely appreciated her tenacity to track me down. And she basically said, "Oh, my cousin applied to work, and you helped her, and she got admitted. Now I want to apply to Harvard Business School." And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's just kind of a Dutch treat lunch where I did a brain dump and gave her some tips on what I thought she should do. But again, I really appreciated her tenacity and thought I'd just follow up with her and say, "I'm sorry, I'm working crazy hours at this consulting firm. I really can't help you." And she said the magic words, "I'll pay you." So the light bulb went off. I worked out a very, very low hourly rate, which was fantastic for her and for me because she was very patient. And okay, well, now let's talk about letters of reference. Who should I get? Should I use an optional third recommender? So she got in. And then it just kind of grew a life of its own. And the next thing you know, I have the admissionsconsultants.com domain name, and I'm hiring people. After two consulting gigs later, I wasn't looking for a quote unquote other job. I had admissions consultants, and it quickly filled up more than 40 hours a week, and it has ever since.
Oh, wow. That's really something. It kind of just grew from that one little side project into something much larger than that. We definitely, one thing we love to hear on College Admissions Toolbox are stories. And while the successes are great, it's also really important to learn from the failures for next time, right? So could you share with us the worst college admissions moment you've seen or experienced and tell us the story behind it, and then we'll get into some of the lessons learned from that?
Absolutely. We had a parent call us in the spring, and I hate to stereotype, and I really do respect everybody that calls us. For whatever purpose they may be calling. Not all of them are looking for admissions help. And the parent was very flustered. They weren't quite sure what was going on, and they thought they might need what we call a ding analysis. That's where we review an application that was submitted that didn't get the desired result, resulted in a rejection. And this person applied to their state flagship university. I guess I can go ahead and say it was University of Florida. We're going back many years now. And when we kind of delved into it, this was a very strong applicant. This young person had very good grades and very good test scores and extracurricular. I'll use the female pronoun. It may or may not have been a female, of course. We try to keep things confidential and respect privacy.
Sure.
But she never actually wrote any of the essays, Steve. She just was so, confident she was going to get in that she never actually bothered to do any of the work. And University of Florida rejected her. And it was the only school she applied to, and she more or less hid the application process from her parents and kept them in the dark about it. So she's rejected from University of Florida. It's now pretty late in the game. And there was a lot of panic in the family. So we had to find another school for her, one of the best that we could given the very late date that we were looking at on the calendar. Things worked out, if you will. We stayed in touch with her. We kind of gave her advice for course selection and extracurricular activities and part-time jobs. And we were able to help her transfer into a top 25 school after 2 years at that.
Oh, wow.
Lower tier school, if you will. And I don't mean lower tier in a negative way or anything. I don't want to sound, like a school snob or anything, but she was never happy at that school. She wanted a school where she would feel more challenged around students that were probably more at her academic level. And, it was just it was kind of a 2 years wasted time, and she never got the full 4-year experience at the school she ended up going to. And you may be aware it's very, very difficult to transfer into the schools because nobody leaves there. If you get into a Harvard or a Stanford, where are you going to go, for heaven's sakes? They're only admitting people for the number that leave.
Yeah, hardly anyone's leaving. There's only a handful of spots.
Exactly. And we've gotten people into those schools as transfers, but once you get into the top half of the top 25, there are no guarantees no matter how strong you are. So again, she got into a top 25 school. Maybe she could have gotten into a better school in the top 25 if she had taken the process seriously, beginning, early in her late in her junior year, early in her senior year. But that was a rough moment. It was very tough when the consultant and I had to have the conference call with the parent and explain, your daughter didn't get into the University of Florida because she didn't bother writing any of the essays. It was hard. There was a lot of anguish, and it requires a lot of empathy, and we have it in spades here. I mean, I feel bad for those parents, don't get me wrong, but it's never a comfortable feeling. The more comfortable feeling is 2 years later that, oh, thank you, this is much better. She's going to be much happier at this new school.
Yeah, well, you got a couple of years delay on that one. So what do you make of all this?
I'm sorry?
No, you definitely have that delay before that things are working out. So I mean, what do you make of this girl's situation?
Hopefully it's a lesson for others that listen to this podcast. Do this right the first time. It's a big moment. You have a lot more opportunities as a high school senior than you're going to have as a transfer. As a high school senior, you're applying for 100% of the spots in all those schools. As a transfer, there aren't nearly as many spots that you're competing for. There's a lot less spots that are available to be competed for. Take the process very seriously. You got to make sure that you understand fit and what it means. Find a school where you're going to be the happiest. If it's not the highest ranked school, that's okay. It has to be the best school for you. That's where you're going to get the most out of your education. And part of that's due diligence. Just don't say, oh, I think I want to apply to this school. It looks great. Do your homework on the school. You might have heard the story over the weekend about the fine arts program at USC? Here it is. The entire first-year class of MFA students at USC's Roski School of Arts quit the program. And I don't want to heap onto USC. It's a fine school. It strives to provide its students with excellent educations. But my gut says that, the things that were happening here had been festering for some time. And again, hindsight's 20/20, but don't find yourself in a position like what those students did. Talk to students, that are currently in the program. Ask questions that might be a little bit difficult. Read between the lines. Talk to more than one student. You may talk to the only student there that loves the program or hates the program. You might discover some things, and that's very important. If it's not a top-ranked school, there's a chance it could be the next Sweetbriar College.
Sure.
So pay close attention. If enrollment's been declining, that's probably a bad sign. If it's declining and they're trying to make things easier, maybe they no longer care if you take the SAT or the ACT. Maybe they no longer require essays. That may sound great, and there could be some very noble reasons for that, but it should also be a bit of a red flag. You don't want to go to a school and then, have them, go out of business. Even if you just made it through Sweetbriar and you're graduating this year, you graduated recently, it's going to make it kind of tough for your alumni network.
Oh, absolutely. So many valuable insights there, David, for sure.
Exactly. You're going to be very dependent on that school for its network for at least the first several years out of school. Beyond that, the school network is still great, but you've advanced in your career and you probably have a different network of professionals within your industry, those types of networks as well. But make sure you're paying very, very careful attention. And there's some whispers out there, and I don't want to be rumor mongering, and I certainly don't want to have any slander lawsuits or anything like that going my way. But there's rumors of some other schools that could be not too far behind Sweetbriar.
Sure.
Let's try to avoid that as much as possible, and make sure your listeners are doing their due diligence.
No, absolutely. Everyone, don't only talk when you visit a campus. Don't only talk to the tour guide. Talk to some actual students who are going to give you the unfiltered, real deal. Go online, go on message boards, find the actual students, over on the Reddit community for college admissions, we have a lot of students posting there, offering advice about their experiences at a lot of these colleges. And you can ask, I'm looking to go to University of Florida. I'm looking to go to University of Michigan. has anyone been there? What's your experience like for real? And this way you can get it straight from the horse's mouth from actual students. And if there is something, shady going on or something is not up to par, they'll tell you because they want to help you avoid, making any mistakes down the line.
Exactly. And remember, particularly now with Facebook and Twitter and other social media, it shouldn't be too hard to find people from your high school, from your hometown at these schools. Try to track down some of these people. It's very easy for us to find your old high school classmates these days, a whole lot easier than it was pre-Facebook and pre-social media and pre-internet.
Oh, absolutely. There's all sorts of ways to do advanced searches on Facebook, or even you could find recent alums on LinkedIn potentially.
Absolutely.
And do some Googling and find folks who can give you the real deal. I also want to tie this back for a second to your initial story about this girl that you worked with. That she didn't bother to fill out the essays. You got to also make sure that you're passionate enough and serious enough about the schools that you are applying to, that you're going to go all the way with your application. You're not just going to kind of give it a cursory glance. You want to look at it really seriously and give it your full effort.
Agreed. If you don't go all the way, the school doesn't want to accept you. They're going to assume, if we admit her, she wouldn't come here anyway. Well, what's the point?
Yeah.
They have to turn to their wait list, and they don't want to have to do that. They'd rather get people that want to be there. And heaven forbid, I'm sure the UF was thinking, oh my gosh, if she does end up coming here, she doesn't get anywhere else, she's not going to be happy. She's going to be a sourpuss. She's not really going to fit in with the rest of the campus. It was an easy decision for them to make to reject her, even though, looking at her on paper, you'd think that she would have been a shoo-in there, and she was a resident of the state to boot.
Yeah, I mean, schools want students that want them.
Absolutely.
They want people who want to be there. They're going to be passionate.
That's how you're going to get the most out of your educational experience.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if you have any other stories to share from your experience working on the other side in admissions. I'm sure you came across a lot of applications, and some of them weren't up to par, and maybe there's some lessons we could gain from that.
There's a few things that probably stick out. Letters of reference would be one. Almost every applicant will say, I'm not worried about that. I have great letters of reference. But they need to think particularly critically about that, because what happens is all of their competition is the same judge of character that they are. If you like your math teacher, but you don't like your science teacher, we know who you're going after for a letter of reference, and we know who you're going to avoid like the plague. And guess what? So too is everyone else applying to that school. So it's not enough to have a letter of reference that says, I unequivocally recommend Jane Doe for admission to your school, and I'm 100% confident you'll make a great addition to your program, and you'll never have even the slightest ounce of regret about your decision to admit her. You want to be very succinct. You got to be right on. There's no detail there. As I mentioned, it's way too generic. Even if there was detail, it might be the wrong detail. If they gave specifics about how smart Jane Doe was, what if Jane Doe's a 4.0 valedictorian with perfect SAT scores? If that was the case, again, you wasted space in that letter of reference. Yeah, we get it. She's a valedictorian. She has perfect SAT scores. We already knew she was smart. But every so often you would see a letter of reference come through that would say something like, please admit this person because we're tired of seeing them every day at the office. Something like that. But it didn't happen often. And you remember those because they're the outliers. That's probably less than 1% of references that come through. But the lesson really there is, again, just don't take it for granted. Don't say, my recommenders like me. They'll say something good. It has to be something very specific, and it has to advance your candidacy. So if you've been president of every group you've ever joined on your campus, talking about your leadership skills probably isn't going to help you. If you're a 4.0 with perfect SAT or ACT scores, talking about your analytical skills and aptitude, probably not going to help you.
Sure.
So make sure they're saying the right things about you that's going to present you as a good, well-rounded applicant and address any concerns the schools may have. Or, on the other hand, potentially substantiate anything you may have mentioned in an essay. So those are the types of things I think are often overlooked.
So let's say I'm a high school kid. I'm volunteering at a local hospital, or I'm asking a teacher for a letter of reference. I don't want them to waste space in their letter, kind of reiterating, going over the same stuff that's already going to be on my transcript or SAT score report. So what could I do as a student to make sure they're going to make the most of that letter?
Excellent question. The first thing you need to do is take the same holistic view of your candidacy that the school's going to take. What are their concerns? What do we need to highlight? Do we need to highlight analytical skills and aptitude? Do we need to highlight maturity and independence? Do we need to highlight leadership and initiative? Figure out what you need what needs to be addressed. What's that quote unquote lowest hanging fruit? And ask them to address that. And before approaching them, spend a little bit of time on the introspection and the brainstorming. Try to recall instances where you did show leadership and initiative in that class, or you did show off your communication skills by explaining something that the teacher had just gone over, but wording it a different way so that your fellow classmates were able to understand and comprehend it. That's the real key.
That's some really great advice, Dave. You got my wheels spinning. One thing I often say to students is, definitely do that research. Go on the school's website, see what traits and characteristics the school is emphasizing in their promotional materials. Those are the things they value, and they're going to want to see from you. Doing a little brainstorming before you ask for that letter of rec, and thinking, what do I want them to cover? I'll ask them, you could even give them a little cheat sheet of some things they might want to mention, some of those anecdotes, the time that you boiled things down into their simplest terms for a fellow student, that time you took initiative. Just give them a little nudge, a little reminder that this might be some quick things that might make it easier for them to write that letter.
You're right on. And that thing I just like to throw out there, Steve. Totally. It is okay if these applicants draft the letter of rep. I don't want to sound overly defensive or anything here, but make sure all of your listeners know they have nothing to fear from the truth. So it doesn't happen that often at the high school level. It happens more frequently for MBA applicants and other grad school applicants. But if one or more of these recommenders ask the applicant, hey, that sounds great, draft it and I'll sign it, then by all means, I want them to draft it. It's okay. Remember, we have nothing to fear from the truth. Harvard in particular loves to call recommenders, and other schools call recommenders from time to time too, of course. But I can just see it now. They call the recommender, and the recommender says, well, technically John Doe wrote that, but I did ask him to write it. I agreed with everything in there, and I signed it, and it's all true. Nothing bad's going to come from that. They're not even going to read the letter of reference unless they like the applicant to begin with. If they see a 2.0 at the 900 SAT, they don't even bother with the essays and the letters of reference. If they're calling the letter of reference, you still have a fighting chance of being admitted. And when everything comes back looking good and any concerns they have about the candidacy are alleviated, it's kind of hard to imagine at that point they're not getting an offer of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the numbers are going to be that initial filter at a lot of schools. But if a teacher or some sort of extracurricular coordinator is saying to you, go ahead and draft it and I'll sign it, in a way, that's a huge endorsement, in my personal opinion.
It is. It's a great opportunity. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's a great opportunity. Seize it. Draft it. You're doing them a favor and you're doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want to go over the top beyond what you suspect they would be comfortable with. If they like you, don't make it as if they totally love you. Find the tone that you think is reasonable. Certainly, I think you could lean a little bit more positive, err on the side of being more positive, but ultimately make sure it's something that you think they might have written themselves if they had the time or energy or whatever. A lot of times they're just really busy and they love you and they want to help you out, but they've got a lot of other things going on.
That happens, and when we coach our clients on how to approach the recommenders, sometimes the recommenders realize, oh, I didn't realize there was so much involved in this.
Yeah, there's a lot. And also,
I don't want to mess this up and do the wrong thing. Why don't you draft it? But yes, by all means, draft it. You're right. You don't want to get carried away. Don't say you're the best student ever if you don't think that's the case. But try to get some details in there.
Yeah.
Talk about how you picked up that chemistry topic really quickly.
Sure. No, I think there's a lot of the value in being able to draft your own letter of record. For any applicant, anyone out there, you could still give them a quick little bullet point list of things they might want to include. The value in supplying the recommender and helping them out and making it easier for them in whatever way is that you can ensure that it will have, or at least is more likely to have, a lot of details that the recommender may not remember or may not have the time to include. I mean, they've got a million other things on their plate, and ultimately it's your college admission, not theirs. You're going to care more at the end of the day. At least I hope you do, because this is your future. So go the extra mile. It's, in a way, it's like another college essay you're writing to some extent, because it's another piece of your application that you have the ability to influence. So really, definitely make the most of it. Thanks so much for sharing those insights and anecdotes. I think it's really valuable for our listeners. I'm wondering if you could tell us about a moment of insight or a flash of inspiration that you've seen in an applicant, in your work in admissions in some regard, that light bulb moment that leads us on the path to success?
We have a college consultant who told me about one of the most memorable essays he ever came across in undergrad admissions. He read it. They seem like a typical median applicant, 50 percentile, if you will. And remember, the people applying to the top schools are all very well qualified. And he was probably on the fence, and he got to the last letter of reference, and it mentioned the person was deaf. And it blew him away because the applicant never tried to use that as a crutch.
Sure.
At that point, he decided, we got to admit this person. So whether that was by design or by chance, that was very well done by that particular applicant who got into that school. And if they did that same thing for other schools, they probably had a little bit of a scholarship fight over them and a bidding war. So hopefully they were able to get some good financial aid out of it to boot. Regarding us as a company, and I can't go into too many details, we had a high school student a few years ago with, I guess you could say, a disciplinary issue at their school. And it was very tough, not just on the student, but on the family. They actually moved. They didn't have to move far. They just moved to the next county over to kind of give their child a fresh start. And when I used the female pronoun last time, so I guess I used the male pronoun this time. He felt bad about what happened. He took some responsibility for it, but we did feel bad for him. We felt that to some extent he had been victimized by the process, if you will, and he wasn't, as bad as what the punishment showed. And we were really, when we talked with him, we were pretty impressed, and we were really hoping if we can come up with some really stellar essays and some really stellar application material. Let's try to we're always trying to get the applicant to the interview stage. If you don't get an interview, you don't get in. And getting an interview is no guarantee of admission, because just as most employers intentionally interview more job applicants they plan to hire, so too do these schools intentionally interview more applicants than they plan to admit.
Sure.
But he got his interviews. They bought the same story that we bought, and he was able to get in. And he just had a really ugly incident early in the high school career. It was not repeated. Thank God. We started working with him, I think, a sophomore year. Right after this happened, he started his new school. And like I said, that was something that probably would have scarred a whole lot of people. And I'm sure I think I used the male pronoun, young man still remembers that incident in probably one of his darkest days. Not that I wish additional dark days in the future on him or anyone else. But we were able to more or less help him mitigate that, overcome it, and get into a very, very good school that he probably would have been happy to get into before this incident his freshman year in high school.
Oh, wow. That's really something. It sounds like you helped him really demonstrate that he'd grown from the experience and matured since then. What are the steps that you took with him that led his application to ultimately be successful?
Probably the hardest part of it for him and us was just talking it through. And not just once, multiple times. Get them comfortable remembering the details. Extract the details and define that, quote unquote, universe of issues and details that happen in this instance, and get them to reflect on it, and then find the proper tone and the proper balance. At the end of the day, we did feel for him. He took responsibility for it, like he was supposed to, and showed contrition. But we didn't feel he was 100% responsible. I think internally we felt like he was no more than 10 or 15% responsible for the incident, yet he got to, he received 100% of the punishment.
Sure.
Which was suspension and then expulsion. So he had to start clean, and, the family had to move. Again, it's really tough. This was a smart, talented young man who had worked hard and had done a lot, scholastically and outside the classroom. So it was pretty inspirational. We all felt pretty good about that, because at these top schools, Steve, they don't have to take chances on applicants. If you see someone and he looks really good, but he's got a big question mark on the file, you got someone else out there that looks just as good but doesn't have that question mark.
Of course.
So, like I said, we felt super, super good the end of the day, which was, I guess, 2.5 years later, if he came to us early in his sophomore year. But that also helped in terms of making sure he got some good work experience and a summer enrichment program, and doing all those other things to help with positioning. But it was, I would say, that was probably the most inspirational incredible moment for me. And if I had to put just one that makes me feel the absolute best about what I do just now, there's been a lot of them, don't get me wrong. We love all the thousands of people we've worked with over the years. I'd have to say that one ranks number one.
Oh, wow. This is so many powerful nuggets in this story. Thanks so much for sharing it, David.
I wish I could share more details, but again, we got to respect privacy and confidentiality. It wouldn't take too many details, and particularly social media, someone would be like, "Oh, I remember that kid from my class. What school he went to? That's got to be him." So I can't say more, and it may or may not have been a male student. There's a 50% chance it was female, and the 50% chance, obviously, the one that got rejected from University of Florida I mentioned was the opposite gender as well.
But wow, so many powerful nuggets in that story. Thanks so much for sharing it. I mean, just the idea of, how do you overcome that disciplinary, red flag on your record? I mean, even when you may not have been 100% responsible or only 10 or 15, whatever.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off. There are some things that students can do that there's just no tolerance for.
Yeah.
And on paper, it sounds great. I'm sure we want to elect politicians that have no tolerance for that either. But sometimes we look into individual circumstances. Come on, it wasn't crack cocaine. It wasn't heroin. It was, again, shouldn't have done it, but and it may or may not have been, over-the-counter aspirin or something like that. But again, you get the idea. Those are the types of things that, it's drugs. That's an automatic expulsion. And again, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But there's things like that you feel so bad. And it's like, you guys just try to ruin this kid's life. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, but whatever it is, it's in your past. It's done. But the idea of, I think a really valuable tip you shared was the idea of, getting comfortable talking about it and, talking about it, getting comfortable writing about it. And so that you won't feel so awkward when you're explaining it, because you'll have explained it 10 times, 100 times already, and you'll refine the way that you talk about it so that you can own that experience, be comfortable with it, and show that you've been able to move past that point in your life and that you're not going to repeat the same mistakes, and really convince them that you've gained that level of maturity, remorse, reflection, so that they're not going to worry that you're going to be a problem student on their campus.
You elaborated on the point I made earlier where I mentioned we had to talk about it multiple times. I'm sure that this young person remembered the incident and internalized the lesson, but it takes some effort to articulate it out loud and share it with others. And you just can't, bury it deep in your subconscious and then try to dust it off, on November 1 or late October for your applications. It's not going to work. It's not going to be nearly polished enough. And that was one of the things that was the first thing we had to do. And it's not an easy thing. It's not a fun thing, but it's necessary. So, ripping the Band-Aid off sometimes, it isn't fun. It's not pleasant, but you got to just yank it off. And that's more or less what we did. Absolutely.
No, I'm glad you were able to help this student. I want to shift gears now, moving to my favorite part of the interview, which is the lightning round. I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. You give me some rapid-fire responses. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Great. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
Fit. Make sure you're an excellent fit for the school. There's a lot of different schools out there. Not all of them are perfect for you. Make sure that the school is a great fit for you. Better to go to a school ranked outside the top 25, graduate valedictorian, have a great experience. And that's going to open up a lot more doors and a lot more opportunities than going to a very top school, not fitting in, graduating at the bottom of your class and being depressed for 4 years.
Definitely. That's so true. You want to go somewhere that you'll be happy, or more likely to be happy. You'll make the most of it, go a lot further in the end. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to admissions success?
Perseverance. The clients we work with tend to have it. The ones that have it in spades are the ones that tend to have the most success, with everything. Everyone experiences luck in their life. You have good luck if you're, hopefully you can exploit it. When you have bad luck, you don't stay down. You got to pick yourself up, dust off, and keep moving ahead and try to mitigate that. Stay focused, continue to work hard. And like I said, something good happens, great, exploit it. Something bad happens, if you get knocked down 5 times, you got to get up 6 times. These things happen to they're terrible things. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound, mean or anything, but you got to pick yourself back up and keep going. It might be that you get cut from a junior varsity team. It could be any number of things, but don't let anything keep you down. Keep moving forward.
Definitely keep moving forward. so important for success. What's one online college admissions resource that you absolutely love?
This is terribly self-serving, but it's going to be topcolleges.admissionsconsultants.com, liberalarts.admissionsconsultants.com, and toppublicuniversities.admissionsconsultants.com. We update them every year. We visited most of those campuses, and 80% of the ones we've visited, if not more, we've been able to take our camera with us. We have pictures, we have videos,
Wow.
And we have a lot of statistics on these schools. We break down the expected cost of attendance based on family income brackets, the average SAT, ACT score, the 25% and 75% SAT, ACT scores. We have some scorecard information. We randomly decided to follow Rhodes Scholars just because we felt like that was probably more objective, if you will, harder to manipulate than if we had found other criteria to look at. We show what percent of students are from out of state, how many graduate in 4 years versus 6 years. So again, take some of that information with a bit of a grain of salt. Just briefly, for instance, Georgia Tech doesn't have the highest 4-year graduation rate, but please understand, a lot of those students are not in 4-year degree programs. Their programs require more than 4 years to graduate. And likewise, if you look at a Naval Academy or a West Point, you say, oh, wow, look at this. Now, I love the financial aid at this school. And they're great schools, Steve, don't get me wrong, but there's a military commitment that comes at the end with it. So,
Of course.
you just don't want to say, well, this is the cheapest school, I'm going to go here. We will update them probably over the summer when all the schools release their information for, this past fall and spring. We think that's a great help to try to compare some of these schools to each other. And you can also compare each of them to the median for our top 25 for each of those 3 categories, whether it's top private schools, liberal arts, or public schools.
Wow. I mean, honestly, I'm blown away by what you're describing. It sounds like you guys have put in a ton of work for this. And I really like the idea of using Rhodes Scholars as a proxy. Because, yeah, you're right. That is extremely difficult to manipulate. And so it would be a fairly telling statistic. So I'm excited to check that out. And we'll link to all of those in the show notes.
Oh, good.
That's great. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without?
If I had to limit it to one, I'd say the Fisk Guide. He does a pretty good job of updating quite a bit of content. He definitely updates more each edition than a lot of other guides that we've reviewed here.
What's next for you, David? What are you up to these days?
We've got to recalibrate over the summer and be ready to go in the fall and figure out, what do we need to emphasize the exact same things at these schools, or are they going to be looking a little bit more for this or that? And we'll also be looking at trends. What worked best at these schools versus previous years, and is something going on there? We have a lot of work to do, and we have a fall season coming up.
Of course, exciting stuff. Well, I'm glad that you guys are staying on top of the trends. Sounds like you're well equipped to do that. Where can folks find you online?
www.admissionsconsultants.com. That's admissions, plural, consultants, plural, all one word. Our number, we have a toll-free number, 1-800-809-0800.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams. One of the hardest things about the college process is finding the money to pay for it all. I was only able to get the scholarships I needed after I figured out how to present myself and what I'd done in the best possible way. So now, I want to give you a free worksheet I made. It's based on my experience working with thousands of high school students. I'm sharing it with you because I really think it's going to help you turn your achievements into scholarship money. So get your free worksheet at www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/scholarship.